Thank you all for joining us for your lunch hour, a little earlier or later, depending on where you are. Today, we're going to be talking about the use of digital communities to help improve the student support experience around learning in the classroom. My name is Katie Kapler. I am the co-founder and CEO of InScribe, so I'll be guiding our conversation today. I also want to introduce you to a couple of my teammates, some of whom are here and some who may have the chance or opportunity to speak with later. So Danielle Bonner is joining us in the webinar today. She is going to help keep track of what's going on in the chat. So, as you have questions, please post them there. We will definitely weave those questions into the conversation as we go. And Danielle is always fully approved to interrupt me along the way and make sure that we get those in there. You can also use the chat, as I said earlier, to introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, what brought you here today. Love to be able to make sure that we answer any specific questions or goals that you have in this session. And then Fred Scott and Carolyn Carter are from our account executive team. They were not able to join us today, but if you are interested in learning more about InScribe after this demo, you might have an opportunity to catch up with one of them. If you're not familiar with InScribe, we are a virtual community platform that is designed to wrap around content and curriculum at an institution and create an always available space for students to connect with peers, faculty, and staff when they have questions or just need a little extra support. So we really work across the entire student life cycle. You may have seen that we have some additional sessions coming up, which we'll talk about at the end of this hour, that speak to other use cases. Today, we're really going to focus on that classroom use case. So how do we build learning communities around curriculum that help meet the needs of students who are struggling or need a little bit of extra confidence boost in a way that's really flexible and meets their needs, but also scalable and manageable for the institution. I'm just going to apparently repeat this several times. Let us know who you are. And I do say, if there is something very specific that brought you here today, put that in the chat because I want to make sure that we touch on those highlights or those potential pain points or opportunities that you're really thinking about. So I'll make sure that we get to those. So why are we here? The very existential question that we like to start with every time. So obviously learning is a critical piece of the experience of students in post-secondary education, and making sure that students can not only successfully move through their coursework, master their learning, but also build confidence and momentum as they do that. These are the elements that are not only going to help them pass those classes, but continue to have success as they move forward. So I know we and you are probably always thinking about, how do I retain more students? How do I build more confidence in my students? And so that's something that we're very focused on here at InScribe. But not only that, how do I do that in a way that is manageable for my faculty, for my institution, that is cost effective, that is scalable? There's a lot of solutions that we could potentially bring to this problem that are very human intensive or very time intensive. That's not an option for all institutions. So we really look at what are ways that we can improve the collaboration and support experience for these learners, improve retention, but do it in a way that makes it easy for the institution to adopt. And of course, we care about this because, number one, we always want our students to feel like they can succeed in their classrooms. And we know that especially in first year courses, high enrollment courses, DFW rates can be something that an institution really struggles with. So these are national averages around pass rates for some common first year courses or early courses that students take. And not only is it shocking to see the number of students that aren't able to pass these classes, but I think we all have to remember that many of these courses, college algebra and calculus in particular, are gateways to other opportunities. So if you're not passing calculus, that could potentially shut down your opportunity to then pursue a STEM degree. If you're not passing college algebra, that often becomes the blocker for you continuing at all in your education. So really thinking about improving these outcomes for students, especially in those early days, is really important. Now, the reality is, supporting students in not just these classes, but any class can also be really difficult. So just thinking like, well, if the faculty member did more or was more responsive would be better, keeping in mind some of the constraints that our faculty work with. In some of these larger classes, the number of students that they're trying to support, the frequency of the emails that they're getting, the requests for help can be overwhelming. And it's hard to keep up with that, especially if you're an institution who maybe doesn't have a teaching assistant or a supplemental instruction model. All of that burden is falling on that faculty member. Part of this challenge is that with all the questions faculty are getting, it's often the same question they're being asked over and over again. So it's many one-on-one conversations that are taking place, which takes up even more of their time. And then doesn't leave them with a lot of hours in the day for maybe those high-touch interventions that some students really need. When we do try to open up spaces for students to come in a more collective way, we know that it's not always the right students that are showing up. So maybe your high achievers are coming to the office hours, but those students who are really shy, nervous, or busy, they can't make it to those events, or they don't have the confidence to show up at those events. And then we're just repeating this challenge every semester over and over again. I also want to keep in mind for the student some of what they're going through. And this is really true, we find, with students, not just in first year courses, but can persist throughout their degree. Like the imposter syndrome piece, right? I'm the only one that doesn't understand what's going on here. That can be very debilitating for a learner who feels like they're really alone, and kind of contributes to their desire not to speak up or raise their hand. We also hear over and over, especially with non-traditional students, so online learners, adult learners, insert whatever phrase you want here, like, I'm too old to be doing this. I don't have enough time in my day. I really don't belong here. I'm not smart enough to get through this. And those internal negative narratives that students create can be hard to break down. And they really contribute to the students' lack of resilience when they run into challenges in the classroom. One of the really sort of simple things is that sometimes support is just not available when students need it. So if you have students who are working and parenting, they're often learning at night, they're learning on the weekends. And so when the support systems are available, which is like, let's say 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, that's not when that student is actually learning and studying. And so at 10 o'clock at night, where do I go if I get stuck? And then all of this, builds up to be like, actually reaching out is quite scary, and I don't know how to do it. So how do we address the fact that we want more students to succeed? We can't just say work harder to our faculty and TAs, and we have students who are maybe feeling anxious about the mechanisms of getting support. So that's what we focus on. So with InScribe, you can upgrade this entire experience by creating a central space where all of your knowledge is being gathered and shared. Even if you have multiple sections of the same course, they can be brought together into a shared space where everyone can benefit from the knowledge. What's generated there is then automatically shared with all learners. So you have that idea of repeat questions happening over and over again, can really get to the heart of that. The reality is when students see other students reaching out for help and asking questions, it is a huge opportunity to boost their confidence. They might get help from a fellow student, they might have the opportunity to help another student, or they just see they're not the only one that has that question. And it's much easier to participate in a space like in a virtual space where you have control over how you're presented, when you're asking your questions. You can take your time to generate those questions. And so you'll see your participation is a much more diverse set of learners. And then finally, you're building a knowledge repository over time. Don't throw that away at the end of the semester. Take that knowledge repository and make it available to the next set of learners. So let's see how that looks. So I mentioned InScribe is a virtual community space. So we bring together students with the faculty and maybe the staff, whether you have TAs or you have tutors on campus, they could be members of these communities as well. And then it's just a really safe, authentic space for students to turn when they have questions. So I didn't understand what was going on with quadratic equations. Somebody else can jump in and help me. And now that interaction is available to everybody so they can learn from it over time. So it's really about scaling support and providing just-in-time support for learners. And here's some of the outcomes that we see through this community model. Institutions are seeing more than an 8% improvement in the students passing first-year classes like college algebra. That in some of those same courses, the number of students receiving A grades actually went up 10%. So big increases in outcomes and achievement. Simultaneously, we're actually reducing the workload on faculty, up to 80% decrease in the number of individual support requests you're getting. So imagine how much extra time in the day that gives back to a faculty member who's not having to answer that question over and over again. But these communities also get to the heart of students' sense of confidence and belonging. So when students have access to participate in communities, we saw, I think it was a 30% increase in their sense of belonging and connection to their institution and to their peers, which has huge long-term positive outcomes for students and really high rates of participation. So it's not uncommon to see 90+% of your students actively participating in their Inscribe community. So that was a lot of information. We're going to jump into a demo, but I want to pause and see if there's any questions or if anybody had comments in the early side, Danielle, that would be good for me to address right now.
We don't have any questions. We do have a couple faculty members in the audience today. So just sharing kind of that perspective is great. Oh, it looks like a question just popped in. So how do you get students to engage in the platform? So I can that a little bit.
Great question. So there's actually a couple things you can do. Oops, I don't want to do that quite yet. So as we jump into the demo, let's talk about that. I think the reality is with a learning community like this, if you position it as the place for students to go and get help, there isn't actually a lot you have to do to drive engagement. Students need help, they're going to seek it out. And the convenience of the community model where I can search for existing answers, I can ask a question and know that I'm probably going to get an answer much more quickly because of the number of people available to respond to me. We just see that students gravitate very naturally to that experience. Part of that, though, is also the access point. So I'll show you a little later how this experience can integrate directly into your classroom so students have one-click access. And I think that access point is really important, that they know they don't have to go hunting for where to go get support. It's just right there at their fingertips when they need it.
So you kind of mentioned this earlier at the beginning of our conversation about faculty members being overloaded. And so there's a question in the chat. Have faculty members reported an increased workload? Just one more place to be monitoring.
Great question. And I will admit that every faculty member asks us that. But actually what faculty see is a pretty significant decrease in workload. Because if you think about it, so there's two important elements to that. Number one, they're already responding to these questions but they're probably doing it in email or one-on-one conversations with students. And so we're just shifting that work from this one-on-one intervention into the community space. So it's not duplicating efforts. And in fact, because you're now doing a one-to-many conversation, the number of times you have to answer a question goes from, people have told us 30, 40, even 50 times in a semester to 1. So we see upwards of an 80% decrease actually in the workload of managing that Q&A. In terms of one more place to check, which I think is a great question, Inscribe has a notification system built in that we'll look at in a second. So when questions are being asked in the community, as a faculty member, you automatically get an email, or we have a mobile app so you can get that notification right on your phone, and then you can interact directly from that notification. So you don't have to check the space. The space is reaching out to you to let you know there's a student here that needs a little bit of help. And I see
there's just a comment about integrating directly into the LMS or the multi-touch points where students can access and Inscribe. And Brooke thinks it's awesome.
Yeah, and we really might agree with that. Like, we want to be where your students are. So in fact, the LMS is an obvious integration point, but I will say if you use courseware from publishers like Alex or Zybooks or Wiley Plus and a few others, we also can integrate directly into those courseware products. So like as your student is practicing or doing their homework in that system, if they get stuck, they can launch into your learning community directly from there as well. So let us know if you use any publisher products, because I'm happy to touch on that. And we might even be able to take a look at one of those. I didn't have it queued up, but we might be able to grab one.
Wonderful.
Now,
so we're all caught up on questions. Why don't we dig right into the demo?
Thanks. And now after all that talk about integration, I'm going to start by demoing the platform standalone, just because I think we can cover more of the features and focus that way, but then I will show you the integrated view as well so you can understand. And I would say in this particular use case, almost 100% of the students are coming to your community through an integrated point, most likely the learning management platform. But just to orient us, so I'm Pippa, and I have joined my college algebra community. So I'm a first-year student learning college algebra. And then we are in the Inscribe organization and the college algebra community. So it's not uncommon for an institution to have multiple communities. And I might, in fact, have one for college algebra, one for my psychology class, one for my English composition class. And I can move in between those really easily through the drop down here. Within the community, the content is primarily organized by topic area. So you can see we have a social space here where students can just introduce themselves and say hello. And then we've organized the content in this case to align with the weekly topics that the student is learning in their curriculum. Sometimes this aligns to competencies, or it might align to a different format of topics, but generally kind of mapping it to how you think about your curriculum is the right way to go. And that's all fully customizable. We also have in this particular community the concept of channels turned on. So channels are subgroups that exist within your community. Not every community uses them. So sometimes it's just a single community and we're all in there working together. In this case, what we have is a college algebra community that is bringing multiple sections at an institution together into a shared space. So there's one big channel where all the students are working together to ask questions about math. But I'm in Dr. Smith's class, so I also have a space just for my, just with Dr. Smith and the students from my section. Other students would have their own section space. So this is an example of the flexibility of the Inscribe platform. If you're a faculty member and you just want to use Inscribe with your classroom, no problem. We would just connect it to your class in the LMS, and then that's your private space. But if you had colleagues who were teaching similar content and you wanted to team up and say, like, let's increase the scalability of this even more, you could come together in a shared community. So there'd be links in each of your LMS courses to the same Inscribe community. So that's really up to you as a faculty member and institution, how you think about that and at what sort of level of scale you'd want to get to. So I am going to start by kind of so when students initially come to our product, they're usually coming because they have a question. So the first thing they're going to do is they're going to start with the search feature. So they're going to start searching for their question. And I can't spell. And the platform does a full text search through all of the existing questions, answers, and resources that exist in the community. So the goal would be, can the student find that their question has already been asked and answered without having to post it again? And then they can give some feedback on both the question and the answer to give sort of thumbs up to the person that asked and the great answer that came in. And now that student who had that question has solved their problem instantaneously. And it's one less question that a faculty member or a TA has to jump in and answer. So that's where that reusability comes in. Now, a student might go straight to starting a new conversation, in which case, they might say the same thing. I'm going to look up something about quadratic equations. And now you'll see that Rosie popped up. So Rosie's the technology assistant that lives in our communities. And her goal is really to try to facilitate the health and scale of the community. So in this case, she's thinking, well, maybe this student skipped the search process. So as they're posting, I'm going to suggest some solutions that I think might help them out. So again, can we connect this student to an answer as quickly as possible? Now, that won't always be the case. So there might be a new question that needs to be posted. I'm going to post it in the big math channel because that's where everybody is. And it's really related to this week 1 topic. You can tag it to multiple topics or just one, kind of depending on the nature of the question. And you can see here, I have lots of things I can add to my question. So I can take a picture of something I'm working on, share a video, I can insert links to other sites as appropriate. I can write in math equations, which is particularly relevant for our math community. So lots of ways to enhance my question as I'm asking it. And then I also have some control over the visibility of this post. So we are always wanting students to show up in the community the way that they're comfortable. And one of the ways that we do that is that when I'm posting, I can control the visibility of that information. So I can just post it so everybody in the community can see it and engage with it. I could post anonymously, which would mean it would be visible to everybody, but my identity would be hidden from other students. Or I could post just to the moderators. So now I'm really just asking the faculty and TA, and the other students would not see my post. Having these options significantly increases the early adoption of the platform for students. Because again, we're saying to those shy students, this is still a space for you, come and participate however you feel comfortable. So I'm going to post it generally to all of the members. Now, when that new question gets posted, that's when the notifications go out. So we have a pretty robust notification system with a lot of nuance to how you want to be notified. So each individual can go and update their notification settings. You can get that instantaneous email. You can get a summary at the end of the day, or you can turn off notifications for certain things. I mentioned we also launched the mobile app recently. And so these same notification settings would exist for your mobile app as well. So you can customize that to whatever works for you. So that question just went out, got posted. Now, one of the great things about the Inscribe platform is it's not just relying on faculty to come in and answer these questions, but it really encourages peer-to-peer support and engagement as well. We all know that sometimes students like to hear from other students, but also answering students' questions helps reinforce learning for me. And it actually improves time to answer for the communities as well, because it's more likely that there's another student online at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night than all of your faculty members. So I'm going to provide a answer for myself in this case, and post it. So now this individual would get a notification that a new answer had come in. And now there's no limit to the number of answers. So you might have one or you might have many. And a faculty member might come in and see how, oh, hey, a student provided a great post. So I'm actually in this community as a moderator. That's why I carry this little badge with me. So there's kind of that icon identifier to help students see where the answers are coming in from the leadership of the community, so to speak. Now, if I were just a regular student and had posted, I didn't have this badge, a moderator could come in and endorse my post. So I've given that student credit for a great answer. It's one less thing I have to respond to. And now that visual cue exists for the other students to know, okay, this is like a certified solution. I know I can trust this answer really well. Questions about any of that?
We don't have any questions in the chat at this time.
Okay, terrific. So students can, and you as a moderator can edit, change, delete posts. You can also move a post into a private mode. So let's say a student asked a question and you're like, great question, but probably not relevant to everybody in the community. I could move that question into a private mode. So I can continue to talk to that student, but now the post is not visible to other members of the community. Now, this is another place where Rosie makes an appearance. So there's where I wanted to go. So one of the things Rosie also does is she just kind of keeps an eye on the health of the community. And so in this case, what she's done is she's running all the conversations through a sentiment API as they come in. So measuring the emotion of the post. And in this case, Rosie identified that this particular student was feeling very negative, sort of overwhelmed, frustrated, and therefore automatically flagged that post and escalated it to the moderators. And it's just Rosie's way of saying like, hey, I think this is either a conversation that needs more quick attention, or this is a student that might need someone to just reach out to them and have a conversation. So it's a way for you to help you prioritize how you're spending your time and where you're spending your time in the community. So you can jump in, take action on that post, clear that flag, and move on. So this is the conversations area. Again, that's really the heart of the community. That's where a lot of the activity is taking place. We also have a resources area. The resources area is usually reserved for the moderators of the community, meaning it's a more curated set of assets. But if you have, supplemental videos, maybe extra worksheets or problems for your students that isn't part of the core curriculum, but you think they might benefit from, you can put that into your repository. So then as the students going through week 1, they can see that there's some extra content related to quadratics that might help them get unstuck or answer specific questions, common questions that come up through that process. A lot of times, faculty already have some of these assets and will upload them for you to get you started. But what we also see is that individuals will kind of use the questions that are taking place in the community to drive the creation of additional resources as needed. So I might see a bunch of questions that get asked on a particular week or point in the curriculum. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take some time to just create a little video that explains that with a little more depth and add that to my repository. You can also imagine that becomes a really interesting feedback loop for the curriculum. So InScribe's helping identify those sticking points and what students are really struggling with. And you might have the opportunity to use that information to go back and maybe tweak the core curriculum as well. Any questions about the resources area?
Well, not about the resources area, but going back to the flagging of posts. Do students see the flag, and could it be seen as embarrassing if it's incorrectly flagged?
That is such a good question. I really should have talked about at the time. The flag is only visible to moderators, so the students do not see it. And also that is why the act of flagging by Rosie does not take additional steps. What I mean by that is, like, Rosie's not going to automatically make the post disappear or, send something to the student. It's really about alerting the humans to come in and take a look and decide, was that flag correct or incorrect, and then decide how to take action. So we always talk about human first, technology enabled, and that's a great example of that. We want technology to help you make decisions, but not make decisions for you. The last thing I want to show you, which I love, one of our newest features, is this live session feature. So I'm filtered down to a particular week. So the live sessions are a way to integrate some synchronous activities into your community as well. So primarily, InScribe is designed to be an asynchronous platform that allows it to have that real flexibility and adaptability. But we also know that live sessions have their value as well. So you can see we actually have a live session running right now. I'm hosting somebody is hosting some office hours to review the contents of week 3. If you wanted to create a new live session, you would just click on here, add the session title, pick a start time and a duration for that event, and then drop in your favorite live link. So you might be an institution that uses Zoom or Teams or some other synchronous platform. You can continue to use that. You would just drop the link in here, add a little description, and then post it. When you post it, all the members of the community will get a notification. They can add that to their calendar. And then just before the live session starts, they'll get another notification letting them know that the live session is about to go. So it's just a great way. You're probably already hosting these events, but it's another really good way to promote those events and encourage participation when they're happening. The other thing I really like about the live sessions is it takes a synchronous event and extends it with all the power of asynchronous conversation as well. So you can see that this one's live now, but I asked people if there's something you want to talk about, or Catherine asked people, if something you want to talk about, let me know. And so Pippa came in and actually said, here's something I'm really struggling with this week. Can we make sure we cover it in this session? So prior to the event, students can let you know what they're interested in, what they want to talk about. Then if you record the event, you can come back and attach it to the live session here. And then if a student wasn't able to make it, they can watch that live event later and even ask follow-up questions on what they've missed. So again, it's like this point in time event now becomes something that can have a life both before and after it takes place. Other ways that people use the live events, if you wanted to have a guest speaker, if you wanted to do like an exam review, lots of different, you could think of lots of different ways that you might incorporate that into the platform. I see there is a question about analytics, which is great. So we'll go right, which is a good lead in right to that piece. Built into the community, there's an administrative area that's just available to the moderators where they can see all the members of the community and what, how active they've been, where they've been spending their time. You can also, and you can go into an individual to see their specific activities, what the things they've started, where they've participated, what they've joined. You can also see here our reputation system. So as students participate in the community, they earn points, not just for asking questions and answering questions, but also for consuming the content that other people are providing. So it's important to recognize that that is an active member of a community, somebody who's coming in and reading a lot and consuming a lot, not just the ones that are posting all the time. So you can see a lot about the individual learners here. And you can also get a summary of what's happening in your community overall. So you can see kind of what's been going on, where the activity is taking place, what types of things students are diving into. And then you can export all this information. So you can export information about your users, about your content, and about activity. And that will give you a flat file, which you can, slice and dice in different ways or combine with other content. This is a nice overview of data that's provided, but actually on the back end, we are tracking very granular learning event level data as well. So if you're an institution that would really wants the big data set to combine with other big data sets on campus, we can also provide that to you. We usually provide that through API. It's a big file with a lot of data in it. So we'll put that into your data repository or wherever you are also managing that information.
Katie, there is a question in regards to the synchronous live sessions.
Yeah.
Can you pull analytics on who attended the live session and who watched it, the recording afterwards?
So we can tell you who joined the live session through the Inscribe platform. It's a good question about watching the recording. I don't know if we track that specifically, but will you make a note, Danielle, and we can find out and let her know?
Yeah, Rhonda, I'll be sure to reach out afterwards and let you know.
I know that we can tell somebody opened up the live session after it took place. I'm just wondering about that. Click on the recording piece if we can see that as well. Awesome. Yeah, we've been using the live sessions ourselves to promote events like this. And we saw a big increase in attendance once we started promoting them through our own communities. So it's really been very successful. We're really happy about it.
I think we probably have a few people that have joined us today from the live session in our moderator community.
Speaks directly to it. Wonderful. So this is kind of a nice overview. And then other things to just note, as a moderator, if you are teaching a really big class, we have some tools in there to help you kind of stay on top of what's going on. So you can see that you can quickly get to any question that doesn't have a response. You can also get to questions that have no moderator response. So maybe a student has jumped in, but no moderator has contributed to that piece yet. You can also change your views. So right now I'm using the list view, but you can also look at things through a grid model. And then I know a lot of our moderators really like this reading pane approach, where you have all your questions down the left, and then you can just jump really quickly through the questions, almost more like an email style view. So kind of whatever works best for you, but it's about really getting to the efficiency piece for the moderators as well as the students. I'm going to go back to this view. Okay, so I would like to jump over and show a little bit about the integrated view as well, because I think that's really important. Excuse me. So this should look familiar to a lot of you. This is Canvas, LMS. We also integrate with D2L, Blackboard, Moodle, edX. I thought there was one other one that we did. So if the learning management system you're using, we're probably integrated into it. Schoology, I think we're integrated into. So again, it's like about being with the students where they are. In the LMS, you have a lot of options on how you want to integrate. Standard, as you add Inscribe to the learning management system, we will add a link to the left-hand navigation, which can be renamed based on the integration. And by default, when you click on that, we are actually going to load our embedded view. So rather than launching the student out to a new tab, we're actually going to keep them in the context of their learning. And so here I can see I have these two channels. And so depending on the kind of question I have, I can jump into the right space. And in this case, I have a question about math. So I'm going to jump in here. And now you can see I have access really to all the same information we were looking at in the other tab, just again, contained within my community. So I can search here, I can post something new, I can view things, I can respond to people. If I want more real estate, I can launch out into a new tab and have that larger view. So that's kind of like the simplest way to integrate Inscribe into your course and get going. The next sort of level up, I would say, would be if you wanted to add Inscribe into each individual week or module in your course. So in this case, once again, in week 1, we were learning about quadratic functions, and we've added a link to Inscribe as a content item directly within that week. What's cool about this piece is that when I launch it, it automatically filters me to the content related to week 1. So now I don't have to kind of search through a bunch of content that's not relevant to what I'm learning. Everything I see here is going to be related to the content that we're learning in that week. So that's a nice feature. And when you create the post, Inscribe or the links, Inscribe walks you through that process on how to set that up. And then finally, if you wanted to get really fancy, anywhere there's HTML on the platform, you can create links to Inscribe. So you'll see we have a little button in the editor that again walks you through the content, the link creation process. Sometimes people will use this to create like a help link on every page, or to create, in this case, a page that's really specific about where to go for different help. Definitely not needed to start. I think a lot of times people really start with just the left-hand navigation and maybe those module level links. But if you saw opportunities to create deeper levels of integration, that possibility is there for you as well.
So you've shared kind of the setup and what's involved in the setup of the LMS integration. There is a question, and it says, what does it take to set up Inscribe? And my general understanding of that is in regards to maybe implementation and the entire setup process. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so implementation is very straightforward in this case. Can take 1 to 2 weeks, and that really is only dependent upon the availability of the administrator to get the LTI integration done. So the main things would be just kind of knowing who you are and the community you want to set up. We have templates for all the communities. So once we know the name of the community, we can provide you with a template ready to go. You can then customize that or just use it out of the box. You can also customize it later on. So maybe you start with out of the box, and then as you identify changes you want to make, you can make those midstream, no problem. We do the LTI integration and setup, do a quick training for you virtually. And then you're really off and running. So again, it's really simple, really easy to get set up and use. We have tons of resources that help you introduce it to your students. A lot of quick start guides on like tips and tricks for moderators to play around with and get used to the community. Excuse me, I got a little tickle in my throat. And then our team will stay connected with you. Danielle, I might need you to take over for a second.
Okay, yeah, so we have a wonderful customer success team that stays connected throughout the implementation process, and not only throughout the implementation process, but as you become a new partner, they'll make sure to send you health checks on your community and what's going on in the community in terms of the number of questions that you're seeing and some of the analytics. So we try to put together a nice report for that as well. It looks like there's another question here in the chat. Yes, Brooke, setup is fairly easy. Again, as Katie mentioned, as long as you all have the time on your calendar to make sure that things get set up appropriately, we can make it happen fairly quickly. Let's see. I think we may have lost Katie, so bear with me here. The question in the chat says, do we offer pilots for institutions? And from our experience, what's the best time of year to start? And quite honestly, it really depends on what your terms are. So if you have rolling starts, we could get you started any time of the year. If you're on a traditional calendar, getting started before, August 22nd is probably a good time. But again, it takes about 2 weeks to get set up. And in regards to the pilots, yes, we do offer pilots. If you want to reach out to us today, we could discuss that further. Any other questions in the chat here?
All right, I'm back. I'm going to try this again. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I just did a great job filling in.
I just breezed through those questions there. Katie, there is a question about pilots and do we offer pilots to institutions? I just recommended that people go ahead and reach out to us after the conversation today. But would you like to add anything to that?
No, yes, we'd love to do a pilot. We generally recommend setting it up for a term so you can check it out. You will know within the term the positive outcomes that you're seeing from the platform. So yeah, reach out to us. As I mentioned, really easy to get up and running. So even if you're thinking about trying this out for fall, definitely not too late. We can get you going and get you started with those benefits with those students right away.
Yeah, I threw the August 22nd date out there. I said, let's get you started before August 22nd. So give us a ring.
Awesome. Thank you. I know start dates are all over the place.
I know they're all over the place.
All right. So that kind of covers the content that we wanted to go over today. If there are any additional questions before I jump back and talk about some of the other things that we have upcoming.
No additional questions at this point in time.
Wonderful. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we, Inscribe is not just for classroom, but that we do work across the entire ecosystem. So this was really the first webinar in a series that we do where we can think about how to leverage the Inscribe platform in different ways. So coming up on August 24th, we're going to talk about ways to leverage community for student success. So this is really about thinking, how do I build community outside of the classroom? Maybe creating better connections between students and coaches or advisors or other student support resources. The next one on August 30th will really be focused on belonging and peer-to-peer. So again, it's about building class connection outside of the classroom, but in these cases, these are really communities for students by students. We like to say, like, what happens when you turn the whole thing over to the students to run? And we have some great examples from schools like Fort Hays University and Reusability College, where they've done just that and had really positive outcomes for their learners. And then the last one on September 7th is we will talk about prospective learners because they too need a lot of support and want a lot of connection, especially as they're making their decision to join your institution. So how to leverage community during the enrollment process to help build that relationship and scale the time of your enrollment team. So I hope you can join all of those. Danielle, are you able to drop a link into the chat?
Yes, I'm going to drop those links in here. We also have a question that came into the chat, and it's a great one regarding privacy, especially in those student to student communities. What are other students seeing?
What do they see?
Yeah, so what is able to be seen in those student to student communities?
So the student to student communities are similar, meaning that students can share their post either broadly with all of the members or they can post anonymously. I'm just going to jump back here for a visual representation. But when we think about privacy, we think about it at a couple of levels. One is that the communities are generally not, especially the peer-to-peer communities, you're not requiring participation in that space. So students are opting in when they choose to participate. You also, as the administrator of your communities, have some control over the visibility of individuals in the space. So in this community, the default for names is first name, last initial. Some communities have full names, or you could opt to just show initials. So you can kind of take that first step of privacy for your students on their behalf by controlling the initial display of what information appears. But then each student, regardless of how the community starts, can go in and make changes for themselves. So if I go into my profile, I can change my picture, I can change my display name, I can choose to share additional information about myself or not. So that control over how I'm presented in the community is really up to me. Now, the moderators of the community can always see who this individual is, what their email address is, but this information is not visible to other members of the space, only to the people who own that community or administrating that community. I hope that helped.
Yes, thank you. I'm also adding into the chat for those that want to learn more about pilots. I will send you a link to our calendar as well as our email address so that you can reach out there as well.
That would be great. And I think we have that on our last slide. You know, we would love to stay connected to you all. We appreciate you taking the time to show up and hear a little bit about the work that we do. We would love the opportunity to work with you. So you can reach out to our team through any of these mechanisms. I think Danielle dropped by LinkedIn in the chat earlier, so please connect with me there. If nothing else, we'd just love to hear more about you and the work that you're doing. And we take a lot of our inspiration from the people that we meet in this space. So we'd love to learn more about that and how we can help.